felt the problem of God's hiddenness, and have at some time cried out, "Where are you, God?" But
I suppose that might be the case for a fair number of people. It would also be the case, however, that an even larger number of people have not asked that question. I speak here of people who are not indoctrinated into your religious tradition, as I take it that you are referring to your God. In 2013, the Population Division of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs reported an estimated world human population of 7.2 billion. Also in 2013, BBC News reported that the Vatican had estimated 1.2 billion Roman Catholics worldwide. The Vatican figure, of course, does not take into account people like me, who have left the Roman Catholic Church and whom you refuse to remove from your rolls, but what of that? But even generously allowing the Vatican figure, 5 out of 6 people have never asked your God where he is.
God. But unlike theists, atheists think this is a reason to reject belief in God, since if God existed and desired a relationship with us, he would at least ensure that we were all convinced that he exists. Obviously,
I would hope that theists and atheists alike would want to be convinced that your God exists. If that God wanted a relationship with us, since your claim about that God is essentially
that there's an invisible man living in the sky who watches everything you do every minute of every day. And the invisible man has a special list of 10 things he does not want you to do. And if you do any of these 10 things, he has a special place full of fire and smoke and burning and torture and anguish, where he will send you to live and suffer and burn and choke and scream and cry forever and ever till the end of time. But he loves you.
Now, would you not want to be convinced that such a God exists?
Obviously, that's not the case, so he must not exist. So it's said. What can we say?
Obviously, you have a point there. So I say.
So it's said. What can we say in response? Well, first, it's true that God hasn't immediately presented himself to our intellect to where nothing needs to be done on our part.
Right, and that is a problem. I do wonder what you mean by nothing needs to be done on our part, however. Do you mean that we should not go looking? I would surely hope not. When Dmitri Mendeleev published his first periodic table of the elements in 1869, there were gaps suggesting the existence of elements not yet known. Based upon the properties of elements around the gaps, Mendeleev predicted the existence of elements he called eka-boron, eka-aluminum, eka-manganese, and eka-silicon, the prefix eka meaning the one following. That was not enough to confirm their existence, however. As a result of chemists and physicists actually looking for elements that had the properties predicted by Mendeleev, eka-aluminum was identified in 1875 and named gallium. Eka-boron was identified in 1879 and named scandium. Eka-silicon was isolated in 1886 and named germanium. Eka-manganese was identified in 1937 and named technetium. Similarly, I would expect that one should go looking for an entity that had the properties you claim for your God, and not accept the existence of that God until it was indeed identified based upon those properties. What concerns me is that you do not mean that, and instead want us to accept the existence of your God based on sketchy arguments made of whole cloth. We shall see.
Done on our part. But why is it necessary that God do this in order to be good? From the Christian...
I've just covered that. One predicts the existence of an entity with a given set of properties. looks for an entity with those properties and does not accept the existence of such an entity until it is actually found. If your God is playing a version of hide and seek in which it moves around in order to avoid detection, it might as well not exist, because we will never find it. And as far as your God being good is concerned, what does it matter how good your God is if it doesn't exist? Superman is a good and noble character that exists only in the pages of DC Comics and a few films on the silver screen. Do you see my point?
From the Christian theist's perspective, God has at least made it possible to know that he exists by providing sufficient evidence through nature and revelation. For example,
I'm sorry, sir, but I do not see that as good enough. Are you telling me to look around and see the glory of God in the natural world? I look about myself and see a world that has come to be as it is as a result of natural processes. Glorious? Yes. Divine? No. Its ultimate origin is unknown to me, but that is fine. That gives me an opportunity to learn. And as I have said many times, when there comes a day that there is no more to learn, it will be time for me to cash in my chips. As to revelation, one man's revelation is another man's fiction, as there is no way to know whether your revelation is truly revealed by your God or is a product of your own mind, whether you believe that to be the case or not.
revelation. For example, there are many philosophical arguments that give good reasons to believe that God exists, some even demonstrating his existence, the 5 ways of St. Thomas Aquinas being the most popular. There's also
Aquinas is a pretty weak hitter to put into the leadoff spot. The leadoff man's job is to get on base, and Aquinas is out on 3 called strikes. Let's have a look at his 5 ways, those being the argument from motion, the argument from causation, the argument from contingency, the argument from degree, and the argument from final cause or ends, also called the teleological argument. The first 2, the arguments from motion and causation, are essentially identical, dealing with cause and effect. Aquinas posited that a given state or condition must have a cause. That cause might, in turn, be the effect of a prior cause. That prior cause might be the effect of yet another cause, and so on up the hierarchy. Aquinas then argues that there must be an event that is the root of the chain, itself having no cause. This ultimate cause he calls God. This is problematic for 2 reasons. First, in the 13th century, when Aquinas was writing, nothing was known of quantum physics. I asked an acquaintance, who was a teacher of physics, about the existence of effects without a cause in the quantum realm, and he said this: it depends on what is meant by cause, but I'd say yes. For example, radioactive decay has no cause in the sense that there's no triggering event. That it occurs is determined by the properties of the nuclide. When it occurs is random. All we can do is calculate the probability of it happening within a certain time interval. Since the current understanding of cosmology extends well into the quantum realm, Aquinas' arguments of causation may well be obviated by this view of causality. Second, even if classical causality applies all the way to the origin of the universe, there is no good reason to call the unknown ultimate cause God. Why not call it, I don't know? Besides, calling an unknown first cause God smacks of God of the Gaps, which your colleague Trent Horn repudiated in his video, Are Atheists Open-Minded?
But when they're presented with proofs for the existence of God, those same atheists will say, That's just fallacious God of the gaps reasoning. Your evidence for God comes from ignorance. You say, I don't know what caused the Big Bang, therefore God did it. I'd rather wait for science to provide the correct explanation and not rush to put God in a gap of my knowledge.
So, I see no good reason to consider Aquinas' first two ways to be credible evidence of the existence of the Catholic God. On to the third way, contingency. Wikipedia summarizes the argument thusly. In the world, we see things that are possible to be and possible not to be. In other words, perishable things. But if everything were contingent and thus capable of going out of existence, then, given infinite time, this possibility would be realized and nothing would exist now. But things clearly do exist now. Therefore, there must be something that is imperishable, a necessary being. This, everyone understands to be God. The problem with this is twofold. If Aquinas were assuming an infinite past, that view was disproved in 1929 with the advent of the Big Bang theory, which posits and demonstrates that the universe had a definite beginning about 13.8 billion years ago. Also, there is no reason to reject the possibility that everything, at least as far as Aquinas understood everything, eventually will go out of existence via what is called heat death. There is no need for concern on our part, however, as the currently estimated time frame for that to happen is on the order of 10 to the power 100 years. Your vacation plans are not in danger. The upshot of this is that there is no need for a necessary being. The argument from contingency holds no water. Now for the fourth way, degree, again from Wikipedia. We see things in the world that vary in degrees of goodness, truth, nobility, etc. For example, sick animals and healthy animals, and well-drawn circles as well as poorly drawn ones. But judging something as being more or less implies some standard against which it is being judged. Therefore, there is something which is goodness itself, and this everyone understands to be God. Even Aquinas should have understood why this argument doesn't work. The standard against which more or less, perfect or imperfect, is judged is not a God, it is a definition. A circle, for example, is defined as the locus of points in two-dimensional space equidistant from a given point called the center. The degree to which the points on the circumference of the drawn circle deviate from this definition is the degree to which that drawn circle is imperfect. A healthy animal is defined to be one free of illness and injury. The degree to which an animal is ill or injured determines the degree of that animal's ill health. Note that these definitions are formulated by humans, not a God. So, degree being defined by humans cannot be proof for the existence of a God. On to the fifth way now, final cause or ends, also known as the teleological argument. From Wikipedia, yet again. We see various non-intelligent objects in the world behaving in regular ways. This cannot be due to chance, since then they would not behave with predictable results. So, their behavior must be set. But it cannot be set by themselves, since they are non-intelligent and have no notion of how to set behavior. Therefore, their behavior must be set by something else, and by implication, something that must be intelligent. This everyone understands to be God. But why can regular behavior not be set by chance? Regular behavior does not depend upon the manner in which a property is set. It depends upon the consistency of that property. An example is a six-sided die. Roll it onto a table. When it comes to rest, a number will show at the top. A 6 in this case. This number showing is a property of the die on the table, and it has been set randomly. Furthermore, unless some agent intervenes, bumping the table or taking the die away, for example, it will continue to show a 6 with striking regularity. The existence of regularity does not prove the existence of a God. Which leads to a final point. The conclusion of each of the 5 ways is, this everyone understands to be God, by which I take it that Aquinas means his God, and yours, since you are citing Aquinas. But why must it be his God? Why must it be your God? Why not Brahma or Ahura Mazda? The reason is that your God is the one with which you are familiar, just as the Hindu is familiar with Brahma, the Zoroastrian is familiar with Ahura Mazda, and all 3 of you invented your gods to answer questions you could not or would not resolve another way.
Popular. There's also good reason to believe that God has revealed himself through Jesus of Nazareth. That reason being Jesus' resurrection from the dead.
There is good reason to believe that the resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth did not occur. I will defer here to Bart D. Ehrman, James A. Gray Distinguished Professor of Religious Studies at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill.
From the dead. Historians, by their very nature, establish what most probably happened in the past, but a miracle, by its definition, is the least probable occurrence in the past. The least probable occurrence cannot be most probable. This is the problem with the resurrection. Even if it happened, it defies imagination and cannot be accepted as a historically proven event. Belief in the resurrection. If you believe in the resurrection, it is for theological reasons. The resurrection is a theological assertion about what God did to Jesus. It is not and it cannot be based on historical proof. Thank you.
The dead. As to why God doesn't immediately present himself to our intellect, I think the answer is found partially in the good of rational inquiry. Rational inquiry belongs to man's unique mode of knowledge. And since God relates to man in accord with his nature, it's befitting God's goodness to allow man to rationally inquire about his existence. Of course,
I hold that the human mode of reasoning is not necessarily unique, but that is grist for another mill. My point here is that if it is in the nature of your God to allow us to rationally inquire about its existence, how good is that God when it withholds a clear answer?
Of course, with this comes the possibility of error. But just because someone...
That possibility of error being not reaching your preferred conclusion, right?
Error. But just because someone might not arrive at the right conclusion about God, it doesn't follow that person is automatically damned. God doesn't hold...
I thought so. But whence comes this bit about damnation? Holding a position on pain of torture does not fit the paradigm of rational inquiry. Not by a long shot.
God doesn't hold someone accountable for ignorance that he or she is not responsible for. So, although God could make his existence more obvious and give the answer in the back of the book, so to speak, the fact that he doesn't is not a good reason to embrace atheism. If you want to learn more about this topic and others like it, visit our website at Catholic.com. For Catholic Answers, I'm Carlo Broussard. Thanks for watching.
If your God could make its existence more obvious, the fact that it does not rather strongly suggests that it is capricious, even malicious, if it exists at all. But you did get one thing right. The fact that your God does not provide clear evidence for its existence is not a reason to embrace atheism, which is the inability to accept claims of the existence of any gods. Were Krishna to make his existence incontrovertibly clear, you can bet that I'd consider becoming a Hindu. I am an atheist because no God is evident outside the pages of the holy book that describes it. If you want to learn more about this topic and others like it, study logic, evidence, and formal argumentation. Learn what it takes to establish proof, and hold the gods, all of them, the Catholic God included, to that metric. For Vox Rationis, I am Diana Clarion, and I thank you for watching.